Aging Committee. Can we have a roll call, please?
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown is absent at the moment. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Stevens. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. We do not have a quorum.
All right, and so due to we not having a quorum, we will start presentations first. Is there anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Madam Chair, no one is signed in.
Okay, we will save the approval to the minutes for later. Skipping to the end of the agenda, I would like to bring up, is everyone here for digital inclusion? No? Okay, is everyone here for child and family advocates? All right, you may come up and present. Sorry about that, but that's that's how it bounces sometimes.
I'm Tricia.
Nice to meet you, Tricia.
Next to me is Steve Walton. He's the president of our board of directors. And Dale, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for allowing us to come in and present. We'll try to be concise and to the point. Steve will start off, I think, with sort of the bigger picture why we're here. And Steve?
Thank you. I want to explain very briefly what a guardian ad litem is and isn't. A guardian ad litem is an appointed individual in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. It's not a probate guardianship that you would mostly feel more comfortable understanding. A guardian ad litem presents and advocates for what they believe to be in the best interests of a child before a court. They're appointed by mandate in abused and neglected cases. There's a statute and a rule that provides for the mandated appointment. 2151.281, as well as Juvenile Rule 4, requires the appointment of a guardian ad litem in those cases. All of the representatives in a case in juvenile court have their own, for lack of a better term, axe to grind. They have their own concerns when they walk into court. Whether it's a prosecutor, whether it's a parent, they all have other interests that may cloud or obscure what is in the best interests of a child. A guardian ad litem presents a case, literally like a lawyer, as to what they believe to be in the best interests of a child before the court. The whole purpose is to allow a judge to be able to make a reasoned choice, understanding all of the concerns, and the most important part of this is a guardian ad litem gives a voice to the child themselves, which without the guardian, they don't really have. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tricia to give you some statistics and some information concerning what's happening with the program over the last number of years.
So Steve and I are here on behalf of Child and Family Advocates of Cuyahoga County. We're a nonprofit organization that is housed at the juvenile court. However, we are not court employees. We are not county employees. We are a separate nonprofit organization. We're charged with running the Guardian Ad Litem program, which is housed at the court. And we're here simply to ask you to consider raising the rate of compensation for the Guardian Ad Litems that are currently serving the children that are involved in abuse, neglect, and dependency cases in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. There are over 3,500 of these children, and as Steve has explained, as required by law, they must have a guardian appointed to their case. The guardians are independent contractors. They submit billing to the juvenile court, and they are paid through the juvenile court budget. We understand that that budget is slated for a cut this year, and so that means we are concerned about the amount of funding that will be available to pay the guardians. Our specific concern is that there has not been an increase in the rate of pay for guardians ad litem in almost 20 years. There has been a slight increase in the fee cap, the amount of money that a guardian can bill for the total length of the case. But there has not been an increase in the hourly rate that guardians receive in almost 20 years. And I think we'd all agree, most of us are not making the same rate of pay that we made 20 years ago. So we are simply here asking the Human Services Committee to consider identifying some funds that might be used to be allocated for this increase. We're very concerned about the loss of guardians. The number of available guardians has plummeted. You have a handout, hopefully, in front of you, a memorandum that we prepared that explains that precipitous drop. There's a bar graph there that shows you the decline in the number of guardians that are available. In the 90s, there were over 300 guardians available in the juvenile court, and today there are less than 80 guardians available. Additionally, my understanding is that this committee is considering an increase for the Cuyahoga County Division of Children and Family Services budget based on the large number of children that are coming into custody and supervised care. We understand that to be a substantial increase, and we support that. The number of children that are being served by the Division of Children and Family Services are also being served at the juvenile court. Every single one of those children must have a guardian. And so if you look at the graph and you think about the number of children that are in custody or supervised care and the number of guardians that are available to serve them, it's unsustainable. You're seeing a dramatic rise in the number of children coming into supervised custody. You're seeing a dramatic decline in the number of guardians that are available to serve them, to be appointed to their cases. And we feel that in the memorandum we provided you, we've laid out a very strong case that the low fees are one of the main reasons that we've seen such a dramatic attrition in the number of guardians that are willing to do this kind of work.
Could you share with us how much they're getting now?
Well, again, they get $40 for out of court an hour, $50 in court per hour, and the case cap is $500. So no matter how long the case goes on, some of the cases go on for years, the most that the attorney can bill is $500.
Is that mandated for that
Well,
$500 cap?
It's the fees are set by the juvenile court in the county budget.
Okay.
There is also the opportunity for guardians to file what's called a motion for extraordinary fees, and some guardians will do that when the case goes on for many months and even years at a time, and the attorney continues to invest their professional time in representing the best interests of this child. That's a billing process that the court allows, but the most that the extraordinary fees can be awarded, I believe it's $250.
Yes, that's correct.
$250. So you're looking at a max of $750 over the lifetime of the case.
And that's rare. That's not a common thing.
Right. It's very difficult to obtain this.
Yes, Councilwoman Stevens.
When you finish with your questions, I have a couple.
Okay. Yeah, she's still presenting. I just kind of slid that in there.
That's okay.
We're really not at the questions yet. I just slid that in.
Part of our
Please
responsibility is to attract attorneys to do this kind of work. We have an active recruitment plan to bring new attorneys into the pool of guardians that would be available to serve children. One of the things we experience is they ask us at some point, how much can I get paid for doing this? And we tell them, well, $50 an hour for in-court, $40 an hour for out-of-court, no reimbursement for mileage or travel time, and a case cap of $500. And what do you think their reaction is?
And how do we compare to other?
That's an excellent question. And in the memorandum, you'll see there's a
Excuse me, can you
chart.
speak into the microphone, please?
I'm sorry? Oh, sure. Let me find it. What page is it? Looks like page 4. Looks like this. Bar graph in the middle, if you have that in front of you. A table, not a bar graph. Wrong term. Item 6 on the memorandum, other Ohio counties pay their GALs higher rates. You can see Cuyahoga County there at the top, $50 in court, $40 out of court. And if you look at other counties in Ohio, you can see the comparison. So Franklin, $65 an hour in court, $50 out of court. Geauga County, $60, out of court, $50, et cetera.
All adjacent counties pay more than Cuyahoga County.
Is the number size the same?
The size of the docket? The number of children being served?
Right.
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. So that's a
Okay.
valid question. The docket size in Cuyahoga County is much larger, and that means the expenditure to the county is much higher to serve these children. We understand that. It's a substantial outlay. But one of our concerns is that we do know of guardians who have left our court and have gone to work in the courts of adjacent counties because they can get more money. So that additionally plays into the attrition rate that we're experiencing. The other thing we wanted to bring to your attention, I believe it's on page 2. The Ohio Public Defender's Office sets recommended fee rates for guardians. They have just increased that recommendation. This is under number 3 on the memorandum. They are recommending an hourly rate of $75 and making the in-court and out-of-court rate the same. In other words, not distinguishing for the work done out of court versus in court. They're also suggesting a fee cap of up to $1,500, which would be triple the current amount. These are recommendations, they're not mandates. And we understand that this would be very expensive for the county to try to meet these rates or match them. But what I would say is our understanding is that these rates are reimbursable at 70%. So that means the county would only be
All of them?
responsible. That's our understanding. The county would only be responsible for 30% of the increased cost.
For years and years and years, the reimbursement rate was 50%. As long as the bill was submitted within 30 days. Anybody that waited longer than 30 days to submit their bill would have their fee cap cut. So it was actually a way that the court cut the cap simply because the public defender identified you have to do this within a certain period of time. Now they're reimbursing more, a larger percentage, so the effect to Cuyahoga County would be less.
I understand that. So when you say that they have to submit within 30 days, are you submitting or are we relying on juvenile court staff to submit the bills?
It is the submission of the attorney guardian that causes the time frame to kick in. When the case ends with a disposition, like a sentence in a criminal case, once the disposition takes place, the 30 days begins to run. If the attorney doesn't submit their fee bill on a form that's the Ohio Public Defender form, if they go too long, then the amount of money they can get is cut to the same extent that the public defender will reimburse Cuyahoga County.
So you
it's cut
said
in the same way.
when it starts, when the case actually starts, that's, I
When
missed
it
the first
ends.
part. Huh?
When it ends is when the
Oh, when it
period
ends,
ends.
okay.
Once the judge makes his disposition or sentence in the case, when he or she decides what it is they'll do.
Okay, then they must submit
So
that.
the guardian and the court would need to collaborate on that billing
Yes.
to ensure that as much money is captured as possible.
Correct.
So how does that, you said guardian and court needs to collaborate. How does that, if a case goes long, how do they bill? Still at the end of whenever that case, they have to keep track of their,
Yep.
who's keeping track of those records? Is it the court or is it the guardian?
While the case is going on, it's the guardian maintaining their own records in regard to what time they spend on the case.
Okay,
Once they submit an Ohio Public Defender form, those hours are placed on that form in the way that the form is set up. That is done at the end of the case, yes.
is there, you stated that the guardians and the court needed to collaborate. Is there a specific person that you guys coordinate at the courts? Is there a specific person assigned to
What
that?
happens is an attorney will submit their bill. It goes to the judge for the judge's approval. It then goes to a juvenile court employee, and it is one employee, that then deals with the processing of the document.
Is there anything else you'd like to point out to us?
I think we would just conclude by saying if the role of Children and Family Services and the role of juvenile court in protecting these children has to work in tandem. So we feel that if the Division of Children and Family Services is going to be provided with a large budget outlay potentially to deal with the additional children coming into the system, that there would have to be a corresponding consideration of the role of the guardians and the fact that they have to represent the children in court. If they do not represent their best interests and if the court docket does not move, these children will be denied the justice they deserve. Every child that's a victim of abuse or neglect is the victim of a crime. And we would really like to see these cases move through to be expedited in a fashion that would be beneficial for children and not drag on for years. And the inability to have available guardians to represent them slows down the court docket. It causes cases to be delayed and extended months, even years. And we're concerned that we're getting to the point where there won't be any guardians to appoint, and that will create a crisis in Cuyahoga County. So we respectfully ask for you to consider how this appropriation could be made. We're not necessarily asking you to reach the OPD guidelines. We understand that that is a large appropriation. But some increase we feel is warranted, either to the hourly rate, to the case cap, or to both, so that we can basically go to the attorneys in this community and invite them to join the work and to receive compensation that would be fair for the work that they do.
It's unreasonable to assume that 80 guardians will handle 3,400 cases.
Okay,
And
what's
that's
the
your-
math on
That's
that?
your current number right now,
Yeah.
80?
Yeah, that's what it is now.
It's about 80 cases per attorney.
It's just unreasonable. You can't have people do that, and you can't expect them to do a good job.
And we wouldn't expect the DCFS workers to have 80 cases per caseworker. The attorneys have to do home investigations. So just like the caseworker goes out, goes to the child's home and tries to discern what exactly is going on, is the child at risk, is the child safe? The guardian ad litem also participates in that home investigation, has to go out to the home. And an additional consideration right now for our county is 35% of these children in custody are placed out of county. That means the attorneys have to drive to Summit, to Youngstown, to Toledo, to Columbus and Cincinnati even, to visit these children. And they are not paid for any of that time.
Or travel. Cuyahoga County doesn't pay any of that. If you want to look at what actually a guardian is required to do, if you look at the Ohio Rules of Superintendents, Rule 48, it actually has a listing of all the different things a guardian has to do. And to require all of that and pay them $40 and $50 an hour is on its face unreasonable. So we're harking back to the days when criminal individuals in criminal court were represented by individuals, attorneys pulled out of the hallways of the courthouse and not paid, and said this is just part of your duty as an attorney. You have to represent indigent criminals. And the court found that was unreasonable. What we're presenting to you is the facts as to what our guardians in juvenile court are paid, what they have to do for that payment, and the number of cases they have to take. And on its face, it's unreasonable. Thank you very much for your time.
I'd like to, Ashley, recognize that Councilwoman Brown and Stevens and Councilman Jones is in attendance. And Cheryl had the first question, but we'll go to Miller until she comes back.
So, am I correct that the attorney cannot file for compensation until the case is completed?
There is one exception to that, and I'm going to ask Tricia to make sure I'm telling you correctly. I believe that for emergency custody cases, those cases that take place very quickly when a child is removed from the family immediately, I believe they can submit a bill, particularly if they're not on the case as the guardian for the ongoing work. Is that accurate?
I think that's right.
Okay, so that would be the only exception. Otherwise, you have to wait until the case is concluded, which could be 2 years.
And the $40 and the $50 that we pay, how long has it been since that rate has been changed in Cuyahoga County?
It's been more than 20 years.
Yeah, it's been a lot. I've been a guardian since 1979. It was different when I started. It was changed maybe 20 years ago, maybe more.
And it has not been changed since? It hasn't been changed in over 20 years?
The only thing that has happened in that 20 years is the cap was changed, not the hourly rate.
And what did it go from, sorry, Councilman
Went from
Miller,
$250 to $500 pursuant to a lawsuit that was filed by a couple of individuals in federal court. There was a settlement of that case, and it ended up with an increase in the cap.
And for a typical case, how is the work allocated between court time and out-of-court time? Is it about 50-50? Is it mostly court time and only a little bit of out-of-court time, or the other way around? How does that typically break down?
It's difficult to answer your question because each case is really depends on what it is that's going on in the case. Some cases require an individual who is assigned as a guardian to immediately go out to a location to see the children. Other cases, it's not necessary to go out that day or the following day. So to try to answer your question, there is more out-of-court time. In my cases, there's more out-of-court time than there is in-court time in most of my cases. I had one recently where it was all in-court time, almost all in-court time. But it was a very peculiar case and required lots of hearings.
Another thing to consider is a lot of these cases have multiple children, and those children could be in multiple locations. So let's say a guardian had a family with 6 children. Each child's in a different foster home. They have to visit all of them. But then when they go to the hearing, all the what's going to be decided on behalf of those children is taking place in one hearing, potentially. So there's definitely, I would say it definitely tips more in the out-of-court time than the in-court time.
And that's one case with a cap of $500, is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct. All 6 of those kids is a cap of $500. That's right. Even though each one has their own case number, each one has their own file, and the facts of each case may not be quite the same. The fathers may be different. The backgrounds of the children may be different. As those of you who have children know, when children are growing, there's a difference between a teen and a 7-year-old as to what they require and what's going on with those children.
Item 7 on the memorandum also refers to the number of hours GAL spend on a case. They're basically paid for the first 10, if you consider the cap of $500 and $50 an hour. The average case length is 30 hours or more. So they're only getting paid for 1/3 of the case.
Okay, well, I appreciate very much the presentation and think you've made a compelling case that these rates are out of date.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Brown?
Thank you, and I apologize for my tardiness today. I was looking at the suggested, or actually the rates that are reflected for our neighboring counties. And our recommendation would put us above all of the maximum levels of the county. Would we still be entitled to the 70% reimbursement if we exceeded that $1,000 rate, moving it up to $1,500?
Well, there's two ways I would answer that. First of all, this chart reflects their current rates, and we understand that some of these counties are raising their rates now. So they're in the same process we're in our county. So that would make the discrepancy even more between what we pay and what the neighboring courts pay. The amount of the case cap, if we were to go to $1,500, for example, which again, we are not necessarily asking for. That's what the OPD recommends. We're asking for an increase of some amount. I don't understand specifically that would affect the ability to reimburse, to obtain the 70% reimbursement.
Okay, so we're not clear, but we don't anticipate that it would be impacted by the reimbursement.
No, and that's something I can do further research on and send to council after this presentation, if you would like me to.
And given that those resources, the reimbursement would be available to us, are there caps where that is concerned?
Well, I think like any line item in the state budget, there's a limit. And they make projections based on modeling and looking at the courts all across Ohio and what they pay. So I do think it's something that obviously you're going to recoup, courts are going to recoup most of that money in the first 6 to 9 months of the year. And there's probably going to be a point in the calendar year when that appropriation is affected and that amount of money available zeroes out.
I don't know of any cap now, but there's got to be a limit. I mean,
Yeah.
Right, so if that, if that limit is met, would the county then be responsible for the difference, or who becomes responsible for that?
that's a good question. I've never known the limit to be met, other than on one occasion, well, that was the county budget was exceeded. So the county had to deal with that. As far as the state itself, I've never come across a situation where they had to determine what to do after a limit had been met. I'm unaware that there is a limit like that.
I think too, you'd have to consider the ability of our juvenile court to capitalize on this opportunity. For example, how well are they doing that now? The reimbursement that's available to them now, how much of that are they capturing? And then second to that, you know, if that is not as it should be, can we facilitate a process where we could improve that and achieve more of that revenue capture to offset the expense to the county? I think the other consideration is, you know, the court now has a budget where they provide for these fees. And when they write the budget, they have no way to know how many children will move through the court, how long the cases will take, you know, how much the attorneys will bill. So there's a mechanism in place now. I'm guessing that number, as Steve said, no number is indefinite, but they probably use a projection method to understand where they want to cap that, and at what point, you know, that cap is met and what happens when it is met. I think that's something we'd have to do some more research into.
Well, I would respectfully request the research so that we are not putting ourselves in a situation where we're granting resources that we cannot financially support on our end. So certainly want to capitalize on the 70% reimbursement that is available to us. But if, as you indicated, the other neighboring counties are also looking to raise their maximums, then that certainly will reduce the pot at some point. So hence the question. So I thank you for your response. That's all for me, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Stevens.
Councilwoman.
Ms. Stevens, can you turn on your
Brown
microphone,
asked
please?
my questions, but I was. Thank you. Forget about the microphone. We see that some of the counties are that are adjacent to us still have rates that are comparable to ours. Is Summit County, for example, in line to change their? Are they considering changing theirs?
I'm unsure. We haven't had direct communication with their court.
Okay.
The major difference is that they pay $1,000 on them.
Yeah, if you look at the third column, their cap is much higher. So even though the hourly rate is the same, the attorneys can earn twice as much on each case.
Right, they're spending the same amount of time.
What's the average number of hours that a guardian puts in?
About 32 per case.
And $1,000 isn't 32.
Well, that's our point, that they can only, even though they do 32 hours of work, they can only bill for approximately 10 hours.
You can only bill for what they do.
So if the hourly rate is 50 and the cap is 500, they can get paid for 10 hours. Exactly.
And the other issue also is the expenses. Because we have so many more children currently residing outside of Cuyahoga County, the guardian is required to go visit them. And if they visit them, they are not, in Cuyahoga County, they're not reimbursed for travel or for the expense of going to visit those children.
Did I read correctly that the state's public defender's office is recommending $75?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Help me do the math on the overall cost, if you know it. So far, it was $75 an hour, an average of 32 hours.
Well, the average amount of time that our local guardians, based on an audit we completed of their time on each case, the average number of time that they spend on a case is 32 hours. They are paid, you know, if you want to think about it as an average, $40 out of court, $50 in court. Let's say they're paid $45 an hour. So with the cap, they can only work on the case for about 11 hours before the
Maximum is reached.
Right, but the case is still going, so they have to keep working. They're appointed to the case, they can't get out of it. So they have to continue to follow the case and represent the child's interest no matter how long it takes. And of course, a lot of our guardians do that. They're very faithful and responsible in sticking with these cases, even though they know they will not be compensated.
Yes. So if we were to entertain a 1,500 max, as you have requested in writing here, help me to grasp the dollar amount that we're talking about. 32 hours, or the total number of hours that all the lawyers do over a 2-year biennial budget.
Right. That's a great question. Understanding it right now is that in the last budget cycle, the court spent about $2.5 million on GAL fees.
$2.5 million under the old policy.
Yes.
So now to triple it, is that what we're talking about?
Well, again, we're not asking for that. What the OPD recommends and what we're suggesting are different. The OPD makes a recommendation, and that's based on, their opinion of what the work of a guardian is worth. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are mandating that communities pay that rate. We would love to see that rate, and so would our guardians. But we understand that there are limits to what the county can afford. Somewhere above what they pay now, either in the hourly rate or in the case cap, is something that we'd like to see. And I think it's to be determined what is a realistic figure and what this community could afford.
In writing, the specific fee increase request was $75 for in and out with a $1,500 max. What you're saying is, although that's not necessarily what you're asking for.
Right.
What is your ask?
Well, I would say two things. We'd like to see either an hourly rate increase of at least $10 or a doubling of the case cap to $1,000. And if we had to choose between the two, I think the doubling of the case cap would be more valuable to our guardians than an increase in the hourly rate. Would you agree with that, Steve?
I agree.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. How many children are in the system that need guardians?
About 3,600.
Currently.
And growing.
Guardians do we have?
81.
And how many children need their assistance?
Every single one of those children is required.
3,600.
81 people.
Right, it's mandated.
Yeah, it's mandated by law that they have a guardian
A real
appointed to
estate
them.
expert, I'm not, this is
Oh,
a
right,
whole
yeah.
new world to me.
You missed
Yeah.
that part of the thing.
You should also be aware that guardians are appointed in other cases. There's something called a dependency case that the county brings. So it's abuse, neglect, dependency. Dependency does not require a guardian to be appointed, but jurists often do it. They're what in this county we call private custody cases, and even some delinquency cases, where a guardian will be appointed. I was appointed on a murder case in juvenile court where the mother had cancer and couldn't come from Detroit to Cleveland, so the child had to have a guardian appointed to take the place of the parent who was not available to come to court. So you have, we're not just talking about 3,600, we're talking about a much larger group of cases, which makes it even more unreasonable.
So how much more would this cost us? If the line item for this was $2.5 million previously, are we talking about a 10% or a 20% or a 30% increase?
Yeah.
And we talked about this, these were reimbursable from the state. So I think Councilwoman Brown made some good points to find out what is the cap in terms of the state, since everyone is going to be coming for that pot of money. So we're not liable, say, even though it's 70%, they might cut it off, and we've stuck our necks out there. So,
Right now, the procedure is that if the reimbursement doesn't take place, that amount of reimbursement, and this is when I was talking about the 30 days, that's when the reimbursement doesn't take place, usually, that money is taken away from the guardian. Court does that.
okay.
So
Councilwoman?
there's no risk, so to speak.
Yeah,
for the
it
county.
doesn't become an open-ended commitment
Right.
for the county then to make up that difference.
Okay.
And to answer your question, in the cover letter we provided, looks like this, it's on a piece of our letterhead. Second paragraph, increased annual expenditure of approximately 1.6 million.
So my question, thank you, Madam Chair, was the 2.5, is that based on the total or the portion that we have to pay, the 30% that we have to pay?
It's the total juvenile courts, basically line item
Okay.
expenditure for guardian fees.
So we would be responsible for 30% of that if we are maximizing our resources, which will put us around $750,000. Okay, all right, thank you. And then to Councilwoman Stevens and my colleague Councilman Jones's point, that 1.6 would be the kind of like a 2.5. A double, more than double, of what we're currently spending. So a little more than double of what we're currently spending.
For that line item.
Okay, all right. Our portion that we would be responsible for. So is that clear? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the math correctly. Right. Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
We are asking the county to make an additional investment here. We're not denying that. We're not trying to say that this is 100% reimbursable or it's not going to cost you anything more. That's why we're here. But I think something to consider, just as Children and Family Services are working with these kids and trying to keep them safe, they can't do that in isolation. They can only do that in collaboration with the juvenile court and the guardians. And so, a child can't be removed from a home without the court's involvement. A guardian has to be appointed to that child. And imagine a scenario where DCFS is removing children and there's no attorney for them. What will the court do? I mean, we don't even know ourselves, but we know one of the steps of prevention is to try to create a system where the guardians can receive an appropriate level of compensation for their work so that hopefully we continue to attract attorneys to the guardian program and ensure that these kids have representation when they're taken away from their parents.
All right, I'm going to have a busy and long agenda. Most of my questions have been answered. If you would leave, I did have a couple more, but if you could leave your phone number, Ashley, then I can have some more dialogue with you.
Absolutely.
And we thank you for bringing this to our attention.
And thank you for allowing us to come in. We're very grateful.
I
Thanks for
have
the
one
time.
more question. If I may.
Councilman Miller, go right ahead.
The question is the 1.6 million, is that the estimate of what the county share would be, or the
Be the total.
would be 1.6 million additional, so the county share would be about a third of that.
Correct.
So obviously you're not assuming that if we raise the cap to $1,500, that anywhere near all the cases would come in at $1,500, because if so, that alone would triple it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Some cases are resolved in 5 or 6 hours. They don't even meet the cap. Other cases go on for 20, 30, 50, even 100 hours. And so it's the law of averages, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will go back to our matters referred to committee. Ashley, if you could please read the first item into the record.
Resolution number 2019.
Hold on one second. Anybody? Let's do the minutes. I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 18th, 2019. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Dale. All right, Ashley.
Resolution number 2019-0230, authorizing an amendment to a master contract with various providers for out-of-home placement and foster care services for the period 1/1/2018 to December 31st, 2019, to extend the time period to 12/31/2020, to authorize an exemption with regard to Ann Grady Services, Sequel Pomegranate Health Systems, and the Buckeye Ranch in accordance with Cuyahoga County Code Section 501.12B10, to remove various providers, to add various new providers, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $73,311,418.
Please state your name for the record.
Christine Alexander, Department of Health and Human Services. On behalf of the Division of Children and Family Services, we are respectfully requesting to amend our current master out-of-home care contract in the amount of $73,311,418, pardon me. We would also like to extend the time period to December 31st of 2020. These dollars are anticipated to cover a shortfall in 2019 of approximately $11.5 million. Also in 2020, we are looking to cover the new year for the amount of approximately $61.7 million. Here with me today from Children and Family Services is Deputy Director Jackie McCrae and David Gray to answer questions. Out-of-home care providers provide high-quality licensed care in a variety of settings based on the specific needs of each child. These levels range from family foster care to therapeutic residential care for children with disabilities. These services were competitively procured for 2018, and an RFP will be issued for services beginning in 2021. As several of you are aware from the budget presentation yesterday by Director Weiskettel, the number of children in DCFS custody is the highest it's been in a decade. Approximately 1,000 more children are in the care of DCFS than were in 2017, making it about 2,900 children today. This increase has crept up slowly over the past several years, and children placed in out-of-home care is her #1 priority in the new biennial budget. At the same time, the custodies have risen. The number of children placed in out-of-home care has also risen by 42% since the beginning of the contract in 2018. There has also been a 23% increase just in the first 9 months of 2019. Out-of-home care costs have risen approximately $9.6 million in 2019, and another $10.7 million is anticipated for 2020. Contributing to increased costs is the addition of providers that are located out of state and/or provide very intensive services with children with special needs. Today, about 1/3 or 34% of the children placed in out-of-home care are placed outside of Cuyahoga County, and we have 13 children that have been placed out of the state. Custody numbers continue to increase in Cuyahoga County and across the state at a rate that far exceeds the number of available and suitable placement options for these children. DCFS competes with other jurisdictions in Ohio and even in other states for limited beds that our current contracted providers have available. The average cost for care for a child in placement is approximately $85,000 a year. There are currently 50 providers in the master contract. Several have been added since 2018. 2 of them have been removed since 2018, and there are currently about 50 total providers.
All right, I just wanted to, could you speak a little bit about the removing of the various providers? The Glen Mills, I've heard that, and Quality Care Residential. Glen Mills, I believe, was not in
It
Pennsylvania.
was closed by the state.
Okay.
Yes, and Councilwoman, the second provider that you mentioned, there was a death at the facility, and DCFS decided not to place any additional children there.
Which facility was that?
The Quality Care.
Right.
That was a recent case that was in the news. Where was it, the place located?
If you can hold on one moment, I can get that answer.
Thought I heard of that one.
Good afternoon. My name is Jackie McCrae. I'm the Deputy Director at Children and Family Services. The facility, Quality Care, is located in the Cleveland area in the Collinwood area, I believe.
Okay. And these homes, I'm just trying to get my mindset, they are licensed by the state, correct?
Correct.
Okay, are they licensed by us as well?
They are licensed by the state.
Okay, but you stated that the Quality Care Residential, we decided to close with that.
We did not decide to close Quality Care. We decided that we would no longer continue to place children in our custody with them.
Okay, all right. Any questions? Councilman Miller?
Where is Glen Mills located and why was it closed?
Glen Mills is located in Pennsylvania, I believe, and Glen Mills the state took action against Glen Mills due to a series of concerns that were reported concerning the treatment of the young people placed there. So following many investigations, there were findings against the facility, And at that point, I believe the state took enforcement actions to address the licensure of that facility.
And what was the total spend for out-of-home placement in 2018, and what is the estimate for 2019?
Okay. The original contract value in 2018 was $43 million. That contract was amended for a total value of $49.2 million. In 2019, the original value was $49,200,000. We are pending this amendment of $11,587,000 to finish out 2019.
So 2019 is going to end up about 60, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And 2020 is currently pegged at 60.
61.7.
61.7, okay. Okay, 20. Okay.
Any other questions? Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The new providers, where are they located?
Well, we have a total of about 14 new providers.
I was looking at the new one that said Ann Grady Service, Sequel,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pomegranate Health System, and the Buckeye Ranch.
Might need, do you know where that Jennifer knows?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Frame. I work for contracting for HHS. Ann Grady is located in Ohio. Sequel Pomegranate is in Columbus, Ohio, and Buckeye Ranch is also in Columbus, Ohio. I'm not sure.
How were they selected?
A mission critical was done on these children for immediate placement. There was usually a disturbance. We had to move them. No other provider would take the children, so we had to look for a new provider that would take them.
None of these existing providers would accept, and these three were willing.
That is correct.
Okay. What were the challenges with the children that made them not willing to accept? If I'm characterizing that properly, what was their reason for not accepting?
Some were medical issues that the other providers were not able to care for the services, the children's needs. Sequel Pomegranate is more of a hospital, so they're able to give the children the services and care that they need. Others where they didn't have the room.
Or they had reached capacity?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For the Ann Grady Services, where did you say that was located?
Toledo, Ohio?
And the other two are Columbus?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, for the committee to be clear, for the legislation that's before us, it says previously approved providers, and it lists everyone, and it includes the Glen Mills as quality care and quality care residential homes. So I just want to be clear that the remaining number of residential homes are still in play. Okay, it's just how it's written.
I'm sorry. Yes, you have that correct. Thank you.
Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you very much. So with the new providers, are you able to tell us the amount of children they're able to have in their custody? Like their
Do you mean the number of
capacity?
beds in their
Number of
placement?
beds, mhm.
I don't have that number offhand. We can definitely get that. Ann Grady and Sequel Pomegranate really serve high medical need at-risk children. Those mission criticals came in. The child that was sent to Ann Grady in Toledo had suffered birth injuries, had disabilities, was nonverbal, non-ambulatory. We really didn't have a special needs agency in the Cuyahoga County area that was able to take care of that child's needs. So that's an example of how mission criticals generally come to us.
Okay, and with regards to the math. Can you just give me the total contract? Is because when Councilman Miller spoke about it, it said our final number at 2019 was 49,200,000, and you're requesting an additional 11.
Correct. 0.5, correct.
11.5, and then the 2020 is
1.7
61.7
million.
million. So that would exceed the $73 million total for these 2 years. So am I not doing?
The 61.7 and 0.5 I rounded, so it should add to 73, 311, 418.
One more time.
Okay. The total should be, the total amount is $73,311,418. The dollars will cover a shortfall, approximately $11 million for 2019. I don't have all the math there. And then about $61.7 million for the new 2020 year.
Does anybody want any further clarification other than myself? I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm understanding it, but I think the problem I have is that these board and care costs are getting kind of steep. Thank you. Increasing, and
At a
all
level
of these
unprecedented.
all of these providers that are listed here that you utilize, and I know for various things, they charge different rates.
Correct.
As well.
There are about 14 levels of care that start in basic foster care at the lowest level, runs about $40 a day for providers. The higher levels of care, the more intensive needs, residential care, et cetera, the care that meets medical needs is much more expensive. Once we get out of county and out of state, it's significantly more expensive. You might be talking about $500 or $600 a day.
And I guess what would be helpful going forward in future contracts, if you could actually list in our legislation or provide,
Kind of a breakdown for what these things are for.
how much each of them charge in the descriptive point. You don't have to put it in the legislation, but actually what each of them charge.
Oh, absolutely.
I know it's based on whatever that child's needs is, so that kind of determines where they're sent based on what their current need is. And so, and out of these providers that you have listed here, have we utilized all of them in 2019?
A good question.
Except for the 2 that were removed.
To my knowledge, yes, we have.
Okay. And do we know our high end of, who's our most popular that we utilize? Or it just depends?
I don't have that figure in front of me. We'd be glad to let you know that.
I
Okay.
think I could speak to that. In terms of our foster care providers, some of the networks that we utilize the most or that have the highest number of our children placed is SAFI. There is NIAP that's on the list.
What letter is Safi?
Yeah, I don't see it either.
SAFI is EE.
Okay.
Specialized Alternatives for Families and Youth.
Specialized
Sorry for the
Alternatives.
acronym.
Yeah.
I was looking for Safi. And then you said the other one was what letter?
There is NIAP, and that is an acronym, and I will find that. That is National Youth Advocate Program. That is letter V. And then there is Ohio Mentor that has a significant number of our foster youth placed there as well.
Okay,
I
so
found that one all
so
by
these
myself.
right, these 3 are identified as foster care placements.
They're, for the most part, foster care providers.
Okay. And I'm just, so So when we talk about the board and care increase, I guess I need to know, this is separate from, this is just DCFS, this is separated from what we spend with the courts, correct?
Yes.
And any other questions in regards to this? I guess the committee needs to decide. I mean, those that were here at the budget yesterday did hear Director Wise-Kettle clearly lay this out. We were kind of prepared for it. I don't know if we can do some work and how we can get some costs down, where the committee can work on trying to do that. I know that one of my things that I had stated, I believe at the earlier of the year or last year, end of last year, is that I wanted to set up some tours of these places. And if they were out of state, that we needed to maybe set up some kind of, where we could see the facilities, just so we can see what they look like and where the children of our community are placed. I know Councilman Gallagher has always had a problem with Glen Mills, so I'm sure he will, since the beginning of our inception, so I will gladly let him know. Maybe it was just something in his gut, about that, so.
Madam Chair.
Councilman Miller?
Just a comment that if we take the 62 million and figure that 70% is from the levy and 30% is from federal Title 4E as stated, that means that the levy portion is something like 43 million. And if you take the 43 million and you add to that the 40 million or so that we spend for the Adams Board and the 32 million or so that we spend for Metro, those three items alone are just about half of it. And everything else that the HHS levy funds numerous programs is the other half. So just for a little orientation.
Councilman Jones?
Thank you. What are the total universe of children that were, you mentioned earlier there were an increase of 1,000 children since 2017. What is the total number of children that are going into this residential that needs to be served by these residential facilities?
It's about 1736 in care. Well, at this point in time, the total number of children in our custody is a little under 2,900 children. So of that number, you have about 40% that are placed in network foster homes. So through these agencies that we're referring to today. So that's roughly 1,000, probably close to 1,200 young people that are placed in the foster homes. And then we have another 7% of the total that are placed in residential facilities. So roughly 213 young people that are placed in residential facilities. And then a smaller percentage, about 2%, that are placed in group homes. So combine that, we're talking about over 50%, close to 60% of the children in custody are in paid placements through our board and care providers.
So 50% goes into paid placement. That's like paying a grandmother or...
That's foster care, and
foster.
that's group care, and that's residential.
And that's separate from this.
That is inclusive
That's
of
part
this.
of the 2,900 number. 50% is paid placement, 2% group home, 7% residential, but the 40% of 2,900 is covered by these in
As,
providers here.
as well as the congregate care, the residential, which is the 7%, and as well as the group care, that's like the 2%.
So the various providers in this particular resolution, they cover the 40% of the network custody and the 7% residential
Yes, and the 2% group homes.
and the 2% group home. So that's about 49% of 2,900, almost half, 1,450 or so.
Correct.
I thought you said you stated 60%.
I'm sorry. if
Okay.
That was what I stated.
Okay.
And that was not correct.
Okay. So the other half are where?
The other half, so DCFS licenses a small percentage of foster homes. So we have about 10% of the children in custody placed in the foster homes that are licensed and managed by Children and Family Services. Then we have another significant number of children, in fact, 37% or a little over 1,000 that are placed in kinship care. These are relatives who are caring for children that are in our custody. The relatives do not receive any type of payment. They may be eligible for child-only benefits, but those are children placed that we are not currently paying a per diem for.
But they are part of the 2,900.
They are part of the 2,900.
And this contract, do you need second reading suspension or?
Because this is an amendment to make
yes.
the dollars available,
Yes.
it would be helpful.
Just looked at it. Any other further questions?
I have one
Councilman
more.
Jones?
You said the number went up by 1,000 since 2017. What factors caused the increase?
I think there were a number of things that could be attributed to that. Definitely, we have seen an increase in the number of children who are drug exposed. So in part, some of it is the opioids, but not totally. We've also seen a number of children coming into care for reasons of neglect, severe abuse. There's a myriad of reasons. We live in a county that has a high poverty rate. There's some correlation between involvement with DCFS and poverty, unfortunately. So it's a myriad. There's domestic violence issues. So it's not just one thing, but we've definitely seen a significant increase. Over the last couple of months, there has been a lot of attention drawn to the agency due to recent child fatalities. Whenever you have a child fatality, sometimes the numbers increase. We've seen that. We've also been making concerted efforts to go out into the community and talk about reporting concerns of abuse or neglect. We're seeing more people taking that role and calling in referrals. So it's a number of things. And across the state, we are seeing increases in the number of children coming into care.
Let me give that back to you, make sure I understood just one of the factors. You just said that as a result of a death, sometimes the increase of children who are taken from the home, the social workers may take,
Sometimes,
more likely to take a
sometimes
child
there's an increase.
abundance of caution, or I don't know.
Sometimes there's an increase in terms of the number of people making referrals to the agency. So sometimes when you have child deaths, that brings the community, they become a little more in tuned and a little more alert and call in different things that maybe should have been called in the past, but that just raises the level of attention and awareness to some extent.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to have a motion to move this to the full council for second reading. Suspension, is there a second? Move, first and a second?
Second.
I need a first and a second, I didn't make the motion.
So moved. I'll make the motion.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if you could read the next item into the record, please.
Resolution number 2019-0231, authorizing an amendment to a master contract with various municipalities and providers for various services for the Community Social Services Program for the period 1/1/2019 to December 31st, 2019, to extend the time period to December 31st, 2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $1,953,105.
Good afternoon again. Christine Alexander, Department of Health and Human Services, on behalf of the Department of Senior and Adult Services, requesting to amend the Community Social Service Program Master Contract. Of these dollars, $150,000 will be set aside for 2019 for current high-volume providers who will exhaust or have exhausted their current funds before the end of this year. And the remaining is for 2020, which represents a modest increase from the original contract value of $1,741,596. CSSP services were competitively procured in 2018 for the 2019 program year, and this ask represents the First Amendment for this contract. CSSP provides high-quality programs and services throughout Cuyahoga County that address the needs of seniors of all ages and adults with disabilities, especially those who are not otherwise engaged in senior center programming. CSSP dollars go to funding 26 providers at 35 senior centers across Cuyahoga County. Services include recreational activities, hot meals, transportation, all with the goal of reducing isolation for seniors while also improving mental and physical wellness. The county funds represent only part of the provider's operational costs. Most centers receive some additional federal dollars which come through the Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. Some also come from municipal budgets and donations. Department of Senior and Adult Services measures program impact through regular surveys of the seniors who receive one or more services from them. I would like to highlight the following data collected mid-year in 2019 from about 2,000 seniors receiving services. The percentage of respondents indicating that they agree or strongly agree to the following questions. 92% of the seniors indicated that they felt better mentally because they participated in senior center activities. 90% indicated that they feel less lonely because they receive services from a senior center. 88% of the seniors indicated they feel better physically because they participate in senior center activities. Here today is the Senior and Adult Services Administrator Tracy Mason, Program Officer Paul Porter, and two of our current CSSP providers, Zalma Zabala, Executive Director of East End Neighborhood House, and Wendy Albin-Satin from the Community Partnership on Aging.
I have one question. The scoring of these individual contracts was last completed when?
In 2018 for the program year beginning 2019.
And so it was signed up for three initially, for two additional
It's
years?
a one-year contract with the option for 2-year amendments.
Okay, all right. All right, so I'm to assume that each of those cities will get the same funding for those 3 years?
Can I turn that over to Department of Senior and Adult Services? Paul or Tracy?
I was kind of looking to Paul because I've been in the scoring process, which is real neat.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Councilwoman Conwell, for participating in that in the past. Our goal with having the ability to amend the current agreement isn't necessarily that each provider will get the same amount as what their initial award was. I think it's the goal of the Division of Senior and Adult Services to take a look at what provider utilization is throughout the service period and make sure that providers are overutilizing, if extra funds become available, might be eligible for those funds. Providers that are doing less utilization might have a budget adjustment as a result. For instance, Ms. Alexander mentioned the funding that providers get from Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. I can think of an example of the city of Lakewood, for instance, that received some additional funding for congregate meals from Western Reserve, and they asked if we could adjust their transportation and congregate meals allocation to reduce what they were getting from us for their meals, but due to high demand for their transportation, move some of those dollars to a different index. part of the benefit of doing a master agreement like this is we have the flexibility to move those dollars around, so we don't have to come and ask for a contract amendment each time a determination like that is made. And I would say the goal is not to cut funding for any agency, more to look at what the funding priorities are and making sure areas that have higher need for funding receive that additional funding when possible.
So the agencies need adjusting. They need to move some money to transportation. Tell us a little bit about that process. So who do they contact? Do they contact DSAS and?
Absolutely. So they typically would reach out to the Division of Senior and Adult Services. I'm the main contact person for these contracts. And when there would be a case like that, they would reach out, indicate what the circumstance is. And 9 times out of 10, we're able to look at the invoice history from that vendor and kind of identify some of those trends and patterns. The alternate might take place where we might proactively reach out to a vendor and say, we noticed that your utilization has been above average in this area, but below average in this area. Perhaps we can balance that out a little bit. And when we're talking about the additional $150,000 for 2019, that's part of the process we underwent when determining which vendors would get those additional funds. It was looking at what their allocation was, looking at some of their historical allocations and historical expenditures. And then if it was a provider that maybe had lower utilization at the beginning of the year, but experienced an uptick because of higher enrollment or a factor like that, we wouldn't necessarily consider just what, their history in prior contracts was. We usually look at the latest data that we have.
And this is 26 various providers, right?
Correct.
Okay. And to be eligible for any new senior centers to apply, it would happen in what year?
Since this is the first year of the contract, we're looking at an RFP for services that would start in 2022. So we would be able to amend for both 2020 and 2021 under the current contract.
Some West Side areas that have not been or may have not reached out. So just wanted to keep that. Any questions for this? Councilman Jones?
Me too.
Jones and Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so 26 with municipalities and services providers. You just mentioned following the need. Well, certainly all the need is there for everyone, but there are some municipalities who are capable of meeting the need. Just scanning the list, I see a Solon, a Strongsville, but then there are others, Phyllis Wheatley, that's 2 blocks from the bulk of public housing. How did you come to the determination that these cities should receive the dollar amounts that they do? Help me to understand the thought process behind this list of 26.
Sure. So as far as which providers receive funding, period, we had a competitive RFP process, and those providers were awarded funding based on scoring. There were, some providers that were not recommended for funding, but I'm pleased to say that the majority of providers that submitted a proposal received funding, and the only providers that didn't receive funding under the current contract proposed programming that wasn't in line with the services we're describing here. Some of the proposals would have been for like virtual services, for instance, or more of a medical model of service. And this program is geared towards the specific services that were discussed previously: congregate meals, transportation, and then activities for seniors. When we looked at the allocation for each agency, we asked providers to indicate, what their budget looks like, what their current funding sources aside from Cuyahoga County are, and then what the services they're delivering are. So how many units of transportation did they deliver last year? How many congregate meals were served last year? How many hours of service? So some of the programs, even if they're in a higher poverty area, area might serve fewer clients than programs that are in an area like some of the suburbs that you mentioned, that you might think they could afford to provide the programming out of their municipal budget. But what we asked providers to do was indicate what their current level of funding was and what their level of need from the county was. When we looked at all of the proposals that came in, really the current funding barely scratches the surface of what the level of need in the county is. The last round of proposals totaled $4.2 million in their proposed service delivery, and that's just a one-year value. But DSAS can really only do $1.7 million a year with the current budget. So if you look, just based on the proposals we received, and that doesn't include some of the municipalities that you referenced that aren't part of this, that's just including the agencies that submitted a proposal the last time around. So the true level of need in the county is likely much higher. We just didn't receive proposals from every municipality or every nonprofit in the county that's serving seniors.
My problem is the need is real. That's not my point. A community's ability to address the need is where we fall in as a county. We fill the gap for those communities that can't. Solon could have the same level of mental health as part of the east side of Cleveland, but if someone doesn't have personal insurance to cover it on the east side, well, we dump our resources there, as opposed to Solon. What I'm not grasping is why a Solon and a Strongsville, how much do they get? Tell us the dollar amounts. Is this 1.9 divided equally amongst all 26? How much do those two in particular get? And how much does Phyllis Whitley and Maple Heights get? Sure. Maple Heights was under fiscal emergency, and they're just barely coming out of it. And there are others on the list, but just give me a snapshot as to what dollar amounts these communities are getting.
Sure. I don't have the specific dollar amount figures for each of the vendors right now, but I can get those for you. I don't want to quote numbers off the top of my head without having them exactly. We do have spreadsheets that would indicate the level of funding for each vendor, so I can provide that after the meeting. I just don't have that breakdown in front of me right now.
I think it's important because we heard from the HHS director yesterday that senior transportation is an additional request that was denied. Okay, we have to justify how we would, go against the recommendation for communities that are capable.
To answer your broader question, the funds are not distributed evenly among every provider. It's not like there's a standard allocation that each provider gets. We take a look again at that level of service the providers are delivering, at what their other budgetary, what their other revenue is aside from this funding, and make our determinations about which municipalities or agencies will receive funding, looking at a global picture like that. It's not based just on one factor, and it's not, a pie that's evenly split. Because again, even among some of the agencies that you mentioned, perhaps the city of Maple Heights serves more clients on a daily basis than Phyllis Wheatley does, so their allocations would be different based on the number of clients they're serving and based on the services they're delivering. I believe Maple Heights delivers 2 services, where Phyllis Wheatley just provides congregate meals under this service.
Well, I'd just like you to share that with us. Help us to picture it. Help us see if it makes sense, then convince me.
Absolutely, we can provide that.
And I would suggest, Councilman Jones, that you attend the next round of scoring when they have it. It's very interesting, and you don't have to go to all of them. You can pick whether you want to sit in a transportation scoring or congregate meals or recreation. I can't remember which 2 that I did, but it helped me understand and see the dynamics of the different individuals that they get around the agency to sit in, and you'll see once you see all the requests and the proposals and how they're given a guideline and how they write it and how they respond to it, then you can see how they make the determination, because I had to physically step into it to understand, and it was great. It was very.
Well, I can certainly do that. Did you have a thought on the allocation?
No, I am fine with it. I know how the process goes. I know based on some affluent neighborhoods where you feel that maybe because they're in an affluent neighborhood across this county that they're better off. But we're looking at seniors. You just got to put your mindset that we're looking at seniors, and seniors have limited incomes, once they retire. Many of them don't have family participation or support anymore. So, that's why I stepped into it and walked through the process, because I'm like, well, I know what sides of the county is richer than others, but really when you take a look at food bank and the dots and the need that's growing with people just in hunger, you will understand that it's doesn't depend on a neighborhood. It just depends on, it's based on the clients that are served at that facility. And if, Solon has only 20, then they're only gonna get for 20 people. Or they might have 50 and Phyllis Wheatley might have 5. So that's how it's basically based on how many seniors actually come out. And that's where our community partners really play a role in engaging seniors not to be isolated and to participate in their things.
Well, I hope you're not missing my point. The seniors in Solon and Strongsville, is it equally as need as anywhere else? They can be alone and they need the services just as anyone else does. My concern is that if you looked at the city budget of Solon and Maple, they have a reserve. They have the capacity to meet the incredible need that their seniors have. And is it equitable when we're trying to determine where to put money, since there's only limited amount of resources, finite amount of resources, and an infinite amount of need, and we've got to choose between two great needs, and it gets challenging to see that Solon has flushed monies in their municipal accounts, and Strongsville as well, and that money sits there. It's almost an indictment it would be an indictment on the county if we were to sit back and say we have $200 million in the Health and Human Service levy, and we did not use those dollars to meet the need. So that's my point. And someone could accuse us of that, but the point is to use those dollars, and if they have it flush, and we're trying to figure out where to put it, convince me. Tell me what is it? Why is it that those two cities in particular, not just to pick on those, you got a list of 26 that needs to be gone through, but hopefully you understand. All the seniors need help. But should we be helping alone, and should not those cities be having, and should it not be in your scoring, not waiting for them to give you a score of how great their project is, but should you already have it baked in that, the city, knowing that they've got a pile of money in their city coffer, and say, well, City of Solon, why do you choose not to use your dollars for this needed transportation? Do you have better projects to use your money for? Tell us why, and factor all of that into the decision process.
Paul, if I could suggest that you would send Councilman Councilman Jones.
To me as well.
Send it to the whole committee. You can bar me. I've seen it, but send it to the committee. Some proposals. Some sample proposals like you received in the last go round, and then that will generate some questions, and you can see that is included what you're asking, Councilman Jones, that you have to put in what all resources that you're getting from other entities. take for example, my St. Martin de Porres Center, Catholic Charities. They have a nice, but they can't afford it all. So they have to, in their bidding process or going for the thing, has to show what their agency is providing and what is that, I guess, that little extra need that we're providing. So I think what you stated here today is answered and is being done. Just want you to physically see it.
And I get it, just put it in context. Catholic Charities, there's plenty of money, the Catholic Church, but they serve the whole planet, right? They serve the whole planet, right? So put it in context. Solon serves Solon.
All right.
Okay.
So
All right.
any other questions? Because Councilman Miller and then anyone else? Because we need to move on. We have another contract and a presentation.
Madam Chair, if you want to bring in a new program, can that be done when you renew the contract or only when you put the RFP out?
Right now, we would only do that during a new RFP period. We have another program through the Department of Senior Adult Services, the Options Program, you are probably familiar with. We talked about it yesterday at the budget hearings. And when we found a need for additional option services in a certain part of Cuyahoga County, we actually issued a specific RFP to that area. So there are ways that we can get around that when we see that there's a need and we have dollars available to do additional funding. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just at the end of the contract period, but generally when we issue an amendment, we do not add new providers at that time.
And the list of 26 providers, do they each have a dollar amount attached to them going in?
Yes, Councilman, they each do have a dollar amount attached going in, but because it's a master agreement, that dollar amount is subject to change throughout the year, and that's part of the supporting documentation that we're happy to provide following the meeting. I can send that to the entire committee.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And the $150,000 for the agencies that are having a high level of utilization, could you name the agencies that are receiving those additional funds?
Because it's a master agreement, I did not bring which specific agencies are getting those additional funds. East End and Community Partnership on Aging are two of the agencies that will be receiving additional funds, and there are representatives here from those agencies. If you have time, we had indicated that there might be an opportunity for them to talk a little bit about what the funding means to them, but I understand that it's a busy agenda today, and that there's other presentations that you have to get to. It's a list of approximately 10 of the providers, and I'll include that in the information.
Would you include that?
Absolutely.
And finally, you mentioned that some of the agencies submitted proposals for virtual services. What do you mean by that?
Correct. So that would be programming that could be delivered in the home of a client using either their television or a computer or a tablet, something like that. That's, something that I think could be an interesting proposal, but a big part of the reason for this programming is to reduce social isolation among seniors. So while seniors would be getting some sort of, interaction or activity in the home, it's not the same kind of group activity that's really one of the targets for this program.
Understood. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Brown?
Well, I just want to state for the record, it does suffice to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that because this is a flexible kind of contract, that if a Strongsville or Solon does not maximize their spending, we can reallocate those funds to another one of these entities that needs it.
Absolutely, Councilwoman Brown. I would say can and have done that in the past.
And it's all, we have to remember, it's based on the seniors that attend these programs. It's based on how that community partner gets them in that community. So it's all based on people coming through those doors and participating in those three things. If you have two providers, I'd hate to waste their time. You can invite them up that had the additional request. They can come up real quickly and give us a quick 2-minute spiel. I hate to, when people come down.
I'll let each of the providers introduce themselves, but yes, there are two providers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looks like it's me. Hello, everyone. I'm Zuma Zavala, President and CEO for East End Neighborhood House, one of our historical settlement houses here in Cleveland that provides services to the community, from the very young to our elders, who we at East End like to call our wisdom keepers. I won't keep you explaining to you how important these services are, because obviously by your questions you have shown your own knowledge of such. The 2 cents that I would like to add is that we often run out of units that we have. So if we've written a contract for a certain number of projected units that we believe we'll use based on the history of services that we have provided in the neighborhood, and that includes transportation, meals, congregate and home delivered, we often find that we run out of units. That doesn't mean that the seniors get to go home. They continue to come to our facilities. And in fact, I would transparently share that it is a fact that many times senior centers in the city of Cleveland are running a deficit because we are trying to meet the high demand of senior services that we have. So that's part of, the ask in the midst of contracting in terms of needs. The other fact that I like to share with you is that it is a national fact that senior centers, in order to operate, need anywhere between 3 to 8 funding sources to operate. So when I tell you that there are senior centers running a deficit, we are asking everyone. You are one of the many in that pot. And I think that's really important to state, because as I'm hearing you speak, I wonder if we can sometimes get out of our own procedures, and this is me, and think of ways that we can come together to look at actual cost for senior services, because I think some of us also continue to operate in what little we're used to asking because we don't want to be denied to be funded, quite frankly. And that we really need to have some conversations out of contracting period, outside of decision-making time, to really look at the projection of right now our average senior is 75 years of age, but we all know that our senior population is growing. You have enough studies done in town by the Center for Community Solutions and everybody who knows that we are to expect more and more seniors coming to our doors. Capacity is a real concern for senior centers. We need more assistance in that area to be able to provide those services. And then we need to have these conversations outside of contract period to prepare for the projection of seniors that will be coming to our doors and we can expect to continue to see, and B, to have a real conversation around cost for services and providing services for seniors. I know I just recently was able to update our transportation services in terms of new vehicles by engaging with a local corporation, United Healthcare. It will be lovely if we could get more corporations to become involved and do that, because I know the rest of us are in the same serious needs in terms of getting vehicles and other capacity needs that we have. So again, I just wanted to put those 2 cents in that, because I didn't think you needed to know how important senior services are. You know that they are important, but you need to know that the services, in terms of their demand, is growing, and the cost has not been adequately analyzed as a collective, so we could really see just how many funding sources we need to support senior services.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Wendy Albin Satin, and I'm the director of the Community Partnership on Aging. And we are a very unique model. 5 cities pay into us. They're the lion's share of my funding comes from the 5 municipalities of South Euclid, Lyndhurst, Mayfield Village, Mayfield Heights, and Highland Heights. And when we talk about seniors and their needs, the numbers of seniors that we've been serving just in the past 7 years has already increased. So we're already seeing an uptick in how many seniors come through our doors, and they come for things like meals, which for a lot of our seniors, it's the only meal of the day that they have. our cities do provide, as I said, the lion's share of the budget, but the monies that we receive from DSAS are critical for us to close that gap. And as my colleague spoke earlier, we run out of units in the middle of the year. And then we will still continue to deliver services. We're not going to stop, but we do absorb the cost. The cost of transportation for my agency is second to my payroll. So it's over $250,000. And that's a lot of money that is absorbed by the cities. So that's why the CSSP monies and the assistance that we get from DSAS is so critical for us to make our budget whole and healthy so that we can continue to serve the seniors that walk through our doors every day.
Thank you. Paul, I'd like to just ask, this needs a second reading suspension, or it could go for 3 readings?
Councilwoman Conwell, because we have the amendment for funds for this year as well as for next year, if we could get this approved on second reading suspension, it would be much appreciated.
I'd like to make a motion to move R20190231 to the full council on second reading suspension. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like my name added, please.
And please add Councilman Miller and Conwell's name to this resolution. Thank you. Madam Chair, if you could read the next item into the record, please.
Resolution number 2019-0232, making an award on requisition number 45672 to Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry in the amount not to exceed $1,210,750 for adult guardianship services for the period 1/1/2020 to December 31st, 2021.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Christine Alexander, Department of Health and Human Services, on behalf of Division of Senior and Adult Services. We are respectfully requesting to award a contract to Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries for adult guardianship services. This contract is a joint contract with Probate Court and is for the period of January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2021. It is a 2-year contract. Again, here today is staff from Department of Senior and Adult Services, Tracy Mason, as well as Kendra Daniel and Mike Garvey from Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries. Adult guardianship services serve indigent individuals that have been victims of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and for whom there is no appropriate family member to serve as a guardian. These individuals have been deemed incompetent by probate court, and referrals are time sensitive. An RFP was issued this past May for these services and closed on July 5th, 2019. There were 13 providers on our vendor list. Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries was the only responding vendor. They wrote a very compelling response. LMM has been providing adult guardianships for 30 years and have been doing so for DSAS and probate court referrals for more than a decade. LMM works diligently to ensure that there is little or no wait time for this critical service. In 2019, the caseload, which had increased modestly to almost 500 clients and can fluctuate on a monthly basis, has been kept capped. There is currently no waiting for guardianship services with LMM. This contract award will support a much-needed electronic case management system in order to increase LMM's efficiency and therefore capacity to serve additional clients. Funding for guardianship services has remained flat since 2014. This contract award represents a slight increase from $69.12 per hour to $71.21 per hour.
Any questions from the committee?
Yes.
Councilman Miller?
So does LMN in turn subcontract with individuals who serve as guardians?
No, they use staff and they use volunteers.
So the $71 an hour is for what?
Is to act as a guardian representative for a senior that's referred.
So do the volunteers get paid?
Yes, they do.
So the staff or the volunteers get paid at $71 an hour?
Correct.
And does LMN get any administrative cost out of that?
That's included in that unit, that hourly rate.
And how many guardians do they have?
You hold on one moment, I'll answer that question.
We've got a question down here, Madam Chair. All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Kendra Denham from Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry. I just want to correct one thing. We have a hybrid program, which is staff as well as volunteers. The hourly rate is only for staff. Volunteers do not get paid, but we do have a full-time volunteer coordinator who not only recruits but trains, but also manages the volunteers. Right now, we have 15 full-time staff guardians who on average have a caseload of about 42. And then our volunteers are around 80 people. And they serve anywhere from 1 to 2 persons help volunteer.
All right.
Okay, sounds like an important piece of work. Thanks very much for what you do.
Woman Stevens,
We needed a definition of volunteer.
who wants to answer that?
Sorry, I can't hear.
I'm sorry.
What are the kinds of tasks the volunteer does?
Yeah, so what we do is we service as guardian of person, which is their medical decision making. The staff take the high acuity cases. The majority of those cases come from the probate court as well as adult protective services. Once those cases are on our caseload for several years, they become more stabilized, and then we can transfer it over to a volunteer who actually becomes their legal guardian, which means they become their legal decision maker.
And so the $71 an hour we heard. My light's on. The $71 an hour we heard. Who gets $71 an hour?
So that's based on the administrative costs of LMM as well as all of our staff. The majority of the cases that we serve on this contract are through our staff guardians. Our volunteers are going to be able to take those more stabilized cases. The other thing, unlike the previous presentation you had about ad litem guardians, for vulnerable adults and the ones we serve, we're going to serve them for a lifetime. So our longest guardianship right now is 22 years that we are serving them. We had them under a staff guardian for several years to stabilize them, and then for the last 10 years they've been under a volunteer to help. Because they're more stabilized or possibly in a nursing home, they don't need as much of a lift.
How did the $71 come? Is that an adjusted number per hour with LMM? How did that number come about?
That's actually the
Budget to run the program.
right.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's the budget to run the program, but our program also has various funding sources. But that was based on this RFP.
All right. Councilman Miller, Jones. Looking right at you.
Yeah, just to follow up, the $71 that is paid for the volunteer. Obviously, the staff has stabilized the person over the years. They're now, I think you just maybe an example might be in a nursing home, but that volunteer is the reason $71 is paid.
No, the volunteers do not get paid. Only the staff.
Only the staff.
This is our program is a $1.3 million program. The majority of cases that we serve are under a staff guardian, and that staff gets paid not the $71, but it's part of our administrative cost.
Does the $71 end at the end of the staff's involvement? Once the staff has stabilized them, do you no longer receive $71 once the staff has stabilized that person?
I think this might answer your question. Occasionally there are cases are closed if a family member comes forward and can care for that individual. Most of the program attrition is through death, unfortunately. These are, seniors. Most of them have medical challenges and issues. So one of the things that was most compelling about the proposal and about LMM's work recently is that we've had well over 500 cases for several years, and LMM put some strategies in place to better work those cases more efficiently, cases that may have been open a little longer than needed, or to search out family members, make an effort to pull that case out and look for family members. They have really reduced that caseload to, at the end of the month, just below 500. So that they have not had a waiting list at all in 2019, which just is an amazing feat for this program. Again, traditionally underfunded and a critical service.
I guess the heart of what I'm trying to get to, and some of my colleagues, I believe, is that when you hear volunteer and $71, it didn't jive. So I'm just trying to understand what
So
was
basically,
the cause.
right now our current caseload is about 495 people.
Okay.
Only about 66 of them have a volunteer. The majority of them are serviced by staff, guardians. So volunteer it's a hybrid program, but our volunteer component is a small part of the overall part of our program. We also have a full-time volunteer coordinator who helps not only train the volunteers, but also connects with the volunteer every single month if the volunteer needs support about making certain end-of-life decisions, pre-needs, et cetera, that the volunteers need. And so that's how the complement. But our volunteer is a small component of the larger program, which is basically staff-run.
Okay. So let's go back just to administrative costs in general. Obviously, we want to deliver service, but administrative costs are needed. There are a certain percentage of it. How long does the administrative costs continue? Do they continue past the staffing levels involved, the staff involvement with the person? I'm still trying to figure out how to ask my question to get the answer.
So I think we receive a lot of money from foundations and proposals, and so the majority of our volunteer support is funded by other funding sources and not specifically by this contract. This contract is really for the referrals we receive from APS, which are usually very high acuity cases. Some of them will be transferred over to a volunteer, but a lot of them will stay under a staff guardian for the majority, if not the entire life of the guardianship.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked earlier. When a volunteer is made a guardian, once the person is stabilized, does LMM receive an administrative fee during that time period?
No.
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 Okay.
No, because the volunteer doesn't receive any payment, so the LMM is not in turn receiving any administrative costs.
Did you misspeak early on when we heard $71 for a volunteer?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That is what we
Christine
heard.
said that. She misspoke.
Gotcha.
Volunteers do not get paid.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The ask for this contract, 3 readings or second reading suspension?
We should be on time. 3 readings is fine.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to move R2019-0232 to the full council under second reading. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Madam Clerk, can you invite our guest from Digital Inclusion Advocates to please come up? Well, whoever's presenting. Good afternoon.
The director of Ashbury Senior Computer Community Center. And just to say that we're here to talk about digital inclusion. And digital inclusion is and has been Ashbury Senior Computer Center's highest priority for more than 17 years. As a result of our dedication to digital inclusion and bringing empowering technology resources to residents of Cuyahoga County, we have had the opportunity to work with and convene several organizations that have also worked for nearly 2 decades to champion digital inclusion across Greater Cleveland and the county. Today, together, we are pleased to present our signed statement and list of organizations actively supporting digital inclusion to you, the Health and Human Services on Aging Committee. One thing that we are an organization that actively supports digital inclusion. And one of the reasons why we think the time is now is because we're coming to you after the Cuyahoga County government outlined Connecting Ohio, investing in digital inclusion brings big returns for residents and the administration. So our presentation is in support of allocating funding for digital inclusion in Cuyahoga County. And again, I am Wanda Davis of ASC3, acronym, the long version, Ashbury Senior Computer Community Center. What is digital inclusion? Digital inclusion refers to the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies, ICTs. These include 5 elements. 1, access to digital literacy training, which we have done for well over 17 years with our partners. Affordable, robust broadband internet service, which we have also helped to provide. Internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, which we have all been involved in. Quality technical support, which is absolutely necessary for every senior end user and younger. And 5, applications online content designed to enable and encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration. What does digital inclusion look like in our community? We have a visual for you, and we also would like a couple of our students to stand up. We brought them along, and let's give them a little round of applause because not only did they get to do digital inclusion today to learn some things, but they were also able to see and participate in your hearings, another lesson that we thought they would like and love. So we come to a request from your constituents and community members. We are organizations that actively support and promote digital inclusion for Cuyahoga County residents. In the past year, we have collectively helped more than 22,000 low-income and senior Cuyahoga County residents gain access to digital skills, affordable internet connections, and affordable home computers. We join together to support the recommendation to the Cuyahoga County government outlined in the Connecting Cuyahoga, again, investment in digital inclusion brings big returns for residents and administration. We urge the county executive and the county council to adopt these recommendations as part of the county's 2020-2021 biennial budget. As you can see on your screen and the information you have in front of you, there's the list of our organizations, and we have several of us that are going to continue and bring you more information that will help you make a decision on finding the recommendations to be accurate and to be needed. Now I want to ask for Bill Callahan to step up.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. So we've referred to Connecting Cuyahoga. I think, as everybody knows, that is a report that was put together in response to an RFP from the county innovation office, and which a number of the folks standing here worked on in different roles. I was one of those folks. I'm the Research and Policy Director for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which is a national organization of practitioners and advocates for digital literacy and computer access, particularly for low-income communities around the country. I should also say, in case anybody thinks that I'm a carpetbagger, that I've been doing this work in Cleveland for 30 years. And I was asked, along with other colleagues at NDIA, to do a section of the report, which is Chapter 2, which is basically a statistical overview of the need, as well as some background on the meaning of this kind of work as it's been done in other communities across the country. That's Chapter 2, and we want to just take 4 quick slides to look at the statistical piece of this. And then Samantha Sharpman, who was the lead on the study, is going to actually talk about the substance of the recommendations of the study. And let me make sure I get the right arrow here. There it is. Okay. In general, and all of the numbers that I'm about to present come from the Census American Community Survey. This is the 5-year estimates for 2013 to through 2017, if people are familiar with that work. The reason why that's the study that's used is because that's the census information on this subject, which is available at a granular enough level to compare census tracts and communities within the community. So we could actually, if we were talking county-wide, there's actually slightly more recent data available, but it doesn't allow you to look at East Cleveland, right? It doesn't allow you to look at a section of Bournesville Heights. You can only look at the city of Cleveland because it's only the only community that's big enough, and it doesn't really tell you much, right? So the maps here are done at census tract level, and they're done from that 2013 to 2017 data. In that data says that basically 1 in 4 Cuyahoga County households has no internet access of any kind. Now, I want to be clear that that includes mobile access. It includes cell phone access. It includes dial-up access. It includes any kind of access at all in the home. That's the census category, not ours, right? And what it basically says is that, and I'll show you in a second who those folks are, right? But what it says is that contrary to what many, many people believe, because we hear this all the time, a very large number of people simply don't have internet access when they walk through the doors of their homes, even with a cell phone. That's just a fact. More than a half of the 122,000 households in the county who made less than $20,000 lacked home internet access of any kind, which is to say, this is essentially an issue connected to poverty. More than 37% of seniors over the age of 65, which is 75,000 people in the county, had neither a home computer nor internet access of any kind. That's not households, that's people, right? So very large numbers. Here's the map of census tracts where 30% of households had no internet access of any kind over that 2013 to 2017 census period. There's nothing at all mysterious about the map, right? These are the census tracts in the county where poverty is concentrated. If you look at a map of census tracts where there was a high percentage of households without what's called wireline broadband access, which is to say what we normally consider real broadband access, a DSL line, a cable line, fiber, right? Same pattern. The only exception to that pattern is when you look at the location of people who were over the age of 65 and didn't have internet access. And then all of a sudden the pattern changes. Why? Because this is a common problem for seniors in communities throughout the county, not just in areas which are of high poverty. It's important to look at both those things, because if you're looking at the people who are served by county services and for whom you might be concerned about getting them online for reasons of improving services or improving efficiencies, those are really 2 different targeting groups you got to look at. Seniors are one group and really isn't as geographically concentrated, and low-income families or households in general are a considerably more concentrated group. I mean, the reality is you can look at the very large numbers of people who don't have home internet access. You're going to find them in Cleveland, East Cleveland, Euclid, and then the numbers go down. So, and you know why. We all know why. We know the statistical background to this. These are big numbers that I just ran by you, right? And what we're here today to talk about is obviously our belief that the county could and should take some leadership in helping to address this problem, but it's a big problem and the county has a lot of other problems to confront, right? If we didn't know that before, we certainly know this after the last hour and a half of sitting here, right? So we want to make it clear that those very large numbers are actually not out of scale to what people have done in other communities around the country. So the last thing I want to do is to talk a little bit very quickly about two other parts of that chapter 2, which are in the pages are listed there, pages 23 through 28 of the general report, which covers 3 projects around the country which did very large-scale community campaigns to lower the digital divide in their communities. And they were all done initially with federal stimulus money in the period from 2010 to 2012. One of them was here in Cleveland, right? There was a program called Connect Your Community. Several of us worked on that program. I was actually the national director of it. And it set out to use federal money to enable 26,000 households in 8 communities, including 6,000 households here in Cleveland and East Cleveland, to move from not having a home internet connection to having a home internet connection, doing all the things that Mrs. Davis talked about, right? We hit those numbers, right? Over the course of 2 years, we did, in fact, we were able to demonstrate through training, through helping people get cheap computers, and through helping people get cheap internet connections, we were able to get about 6,000 households connected over 2 years. And then the program came to an end because the federal money came to an end. The other program I want to refer to, however, which is also described in the report, happened in Boston. It was a very similar program. It was called Tech Goes Home. It was a nonprofit organization with a lot of support from the school district and the city there. But similar funding, similar costs. And they did actually a little better than we did in the first couple of years, right? But the difference is that that program continued because the city of Boston supported it. And so that program has continued over the last 7 years that the program in Cleveland didn't get to continue and has now served over 30,000 households. 30,000 households is a serious bite in the digital divide process that I was just describing. So what that tells you is, 1, the process works. 2, the process isn't free, right? And 3, if you keep at it, you really do make a significant difference in the scale. And that's all I really wanted to say. I'm going to pass this off to Samantha Sharp. This is a problem we can fix, I think, is what I just said, right? So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Samantha Sharpman to talk about the report itself.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, for taking the time to hear us, and thank you, Bill, for all of the work that you've done and contributed over these years to digital inclusion here in Cuyahoga County. And really thank you to all of us. Wanda Davis, you have a lot of really great leaders here. So it's been a privilege to do this report and share the findings in support of the work that they've done. So my name is Samantha Sharpman. I am the Executive Director of Connected Insights, and we are the organization that took the lead on preparing the Connecting Cuyahoga report. But we didn't do it alone. We did it with a really great all-star cast of authors and collaborators, including one that you just heard, Bill Callahan, who contributed, obviously, on behalf of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. But we also worked with Karen Mossberger and Sean Novak of the Arizona State University. Karen is very well published, possibly one of the most published people on the topics of digital inclusion and public policy. And Dr. Amy Schoen, who's with us here today, and you'll hear from in a little bit. What I want to actually here to say is that through the findings, through all the work that we've done, through going department by department, through interviewing every director that we could, to looking through all of the data that we were able to get access to, we've come to a pretty solid conclusion that Cuyahoga County has a real opportunity to lead in this area, in this space. And in their leadership, they would find significant fiscal and social returns. So we ultimately came away with 5 recommendations. I'm just going to give you a brief overview here. 5 recommendations were found: data and evaluation, digital inclusion, leadership positions, advisory council. But all of those recommendations really come down to 2 different funding areas, 2 different needs for funding. One is to help to support a single FTE in what we assume is the Office of Innovation and Performance, to take a leadership on the role of digital inclusion in this community. And then the second is some funding to set aside to support programming in our communities. So I'm going to focus on these 2 just because I think that's what we want to look at. Is so in creating a digital inclusion leadership position, the county kind of gets 3 different goals, 3 of the 5 other goals. First of all, a person at the county is able to drive the identification of data and evaluation strategies. This is one of the things that we've really struggled with. There's not a lot of data being collected that's easily mapped to digital inclusion outcomes. Just the way the administrative numbers and metrics are calculated don't really allow for, picking apart the different categories so that you can understand the channels that people come through departments, whether it's phone or website or coming into the office. We don't really have that level of granular detail, or at least it wasn't provided. It wasn't able to be provided to us during our 8-month investigation. So one of the things, someone having internal could actually drive that systematic review of how do we actually collect and organize our data so that we can position ourselves to calculate what a return might look like in the future. Would investment be made? 2, convening an advisory council of both internal and external stakeholders. Now, the reason for this is there's a lot of great leadership out here. There are members of stakeholder organizations that have traditionally been at the table, but there's also great opportunities for alignment within departments. And just for instance, there is one of our great community leaders, Wanda Davis, who you heard from earlier, is actually doing work with community centers that the county is already subsidizing. So there's obvious alignments that we could build on, expand on, that don't necessarily add to the budget, right? It just needs a little bit of leadership, guidance, and use. So, obviously having that person would then allow the county to drive digital inclusion initiatives of its own and generally advocate for inclusion and equity. Having a digital inclusion program fund also supports these interdepartmental innovations, like the one I kind of outlined. If that was able to be facilitated more through some small budget, that could really bring large returns and help to bring more value out of activities that are existing. And also stabilize a much needed resource in our community. One of the things that we struggle with in this community is intermittent funding. There are grants, they're time sensitive or time delineated. And so for those that are here that have done this work for many years are the ones that really have been able to weather the storm. There are actually far more that have touched and done work in the digital inclusion space than you see represented here today. And a lot of that is because of this intermittent instability of funding sources. So before I get into really the business case of the digital inclusion logic that we've kind of come to outline, I want to kind of underscore what I said earlier about there being a really a significant lack of data specific to teasing apart elements of performance metrics that are able to be connected to digital inclusion directly within the county. So some of our analysis comes from and are extrapolated with county numbers from the University of Utah, who did an exhaustive 10-year investigation into the state of Utah's public administration structures. It is probably the best example of a high and deep analysis of this kind that's been done. There's not a lot of research in this field, I will tell you that. But what the University of Utah did is significant. So because of this, our first recommendation is that we do the data and evaluation strategy internally. But to have this leadership, I just want to give you an idea. As a result of the University of Utah study, they were able to find that they saved $46 million in costs over 5 years. That's significant. That's a huge chunk of change. Now, we can't say that that is necessarily the exact number that is applicable to Cuyahoga County, but this is an example of a public administration that transitioned just 9 transactions to an online platform. That's akin to something like encouraging more people to pay their parking tickets online, okay? Or signing up for Medicaid online versus doing that in office. So things like that have huge return, have the potential to yield large returns. So last year, JFS provided benefits to over 250,000 unduplicated residents, or roughly 20% of the overall population of the county. And in order to manage those benefits that were provided to those residents, they received an average of 60 to 70,000 phone calls a month. And from what I've understood, those projections are slated to increase over time. And as you say, like their peak were 87,000. So that University of Utah study showed that on average, the average cost of an offline transaction, meaning in person or over the phone, is around $17. But the cost of an online transaction is under $4. Huge difference. So you can see every one of those phone calls could represent a potential savings for the county. Now, what dollar amount would be applicable to Cuyahoga County? That's an investigation we need to do, but this is an in-depth, analysis that has been done for the state of Utah. We believe that the number wouldn't be necessarily far off. Another example of cost savings, and this is one that actually brings some numbers home. So hospitals save $3 to $4 every time an appointment that patients schedule themselves. That number comes from Summa Healthcare. And then $1 for every time you just check your test results online. That's actually a Metro Health number. So right here in our own backyard. So Cuyahoga County could actually save, could potentially, in a thought experiment, if we kind of looked at all these different facets, we've estimated that there's a potential savings of about $60 per in-person transaction that could be saved by offsetting staff time and overhead and all of that stuff. And social service clients managing benefits could actually potentially sidestep hours of lost work. That means you have to, if you need to re-up your benefits, you're taking off work, you're catching a bus, you're finding childcare, you're coming out, all of these things that add up to a significant cost savings for our underserved populations. But moreover than that, again, to bring this really more home, economic impact is a huge cost, added value to doing digital inclusion. The increases in broadband adoption have been found to be a significant and strong predictor of economic growth, prosperity, and full-time employment. These are 10-year longitudinal study numbers that came from using U.S. Census and Brookings information. So this is very, very good information. And making sure that we adjust for many other things as far as differences in cost of living and all of those things across different populations. They're at the MSA level. The constant was found that in higher numbers of connectivity amongst the population correlate closely to better outcomes economically. And I should say that as far as economic impact, we feel that this aligns closely to the strategic plan of the county as far as regional growth is concerned. But economic mobility, is only one side of benefits. There's also a huge value in improving the health of our population. So a lot of research has been done as far as projecting when the crisis proportion of the aging population of the baby boomers are coming. So over the next 10 years, this huge chunk of people are going to be aging and are going to be depending on hospital services, aging in place, all of that stuff. And we believe strongly that an increase in digital skills is important, if not imperative, to offsetting the costs and burden on our existing systems for supporting that activity and maintaining independent living for our residents. Some of this is done through potential advances in telehealth and connected devices. As you're seeing, seniors are now able to visit and interact with their doctors at home through the internet. And these are offered through the Cleveland Clinic. Metro Health has apps on all of that. So when transportation is difficult for our residents, particularly in cold or bad weather, if you don't have a car or you're depending on public transit, or as a lot of seniors are, they don't necessarily drive anymore. This is a huge asset for aging in place. But this doesn't just benefit seniors, it also benefits our local economy. It opens up and supports innovation into the development of new connected devices and the ways that we can leverage these things to enhance and bring better health and quality of living to our residents. So when we come down to it, what does it cost? So I want you to understand that, we understand that this is a tight budget year. These numbers were based on a requested analysis of what programs generally cost. And so with this understanding, we don't have a specific request as far as our funding, but rather we want to ask that the county allocate something to keep this work moving forward and evolving with the needs of our residents. We believe that the county taking leadership on this role will enable us to leverage additional resources in our community and also add some structure and drive and leadership around what is already in place. But really what comes down to it, when we've estimated the cost of training to be around $300 a person. That gets someone from completely never touching a computer through, I have the skills and now can navigate and use a computer in order to yield the returns that we discussed for the county as far as managing benefits online, using telehealth resources, et cetera. So this is a problem we need to fix. This community has been at it for, as you've heard, 30 years. We have 17 organizations that have dedicated their time and resources with little support because we all collectively see the need of this information, of this work to be done in our communities. We need to stabilize this. We need leadership. We need someone to align all of the wonderful resources and activities and passion that we have in our community and make it work for our residents. There's a lot at stake, and we feel that over time, the county will not only get that investment back, but it will get it back with interest. Thank you.
I have. Which do I put down? These. Hi, my name is Dr. Amy Schoen. I work at Case Western Reserve School of Medicine and served as the health subject matter expert for the report. Although I speak to you today as a private citizen, my opinions are my own. One thing that I want to add to what Samantha said is that we have a tremendous variation in health. We have tremendous disparities in health across our community. There's more than a 24-year difference in how long you live based on where you live. These maps may look a little familiar because you see that the places where people have a short life expectancy are also where people don't have the internet. The second map, I apologize, I lost the label, but that's the prevalence of diabetes. And people in some neighborhoods, the risk of diabetes is 6 times what it is in other neighborhoods. Samantha also went over some of the benefits of being digitally connected for health, and this kind of lays that out in more detail. But one thing I want to reiterate is that the federal government spent over $40 billion in health information technology and electronic health records, and that's why all this health IT technology is coming out. For our low-income residents not to be able to take advantage of that federal government investment really is a social justice issue. So I just want you to think about it that way. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that health care only determines a very small fraction of that 24-year difference in life expectancy. Rather, it's what we call the social determinants of health that have a much, much, much bigger impact on people's health. And as I'm sure you can see, all of these things, economic stability, education, transportation, housing, food access, social circumstances, are all made better if you have digital connectivity. So that's how, even if you don't use connectivity directly to benefit your health, if you improve these other things, you're going to improve your health. As I said, I think it's a health equity issue. Cleveland was one of the first big studies looking at all of the 250,000 patients at Metro Health, and they found huge disparities in who did and did not use the electronic health record. And as you might guess, seniors were much less likely to use it, as were people with Medicaid insurance. Or no insurance. However, the biggest predictor of whether or not people use that electronic health record was whether they lived in a neighborhood where large numbers of people were using the internet, even controlling for differences in income. So it's having internet in your neighborhood it just makes a huge difference. Just 5 conditions, there have been apps developed that could save $7 billion a year nationally in healthcare costs, just from 5 apps. And I'm sure, as you may imagine, there are hundreds of thousands of health apps available. So this is just a notion of a couple of ways that digital inclusion supports the county's strategic goals. Infant mortality, is so important. You could imagine babies that are wearing monitors that could alert the mother or a doctor immediately if a child stopped breathing. And as Samantha talked about, being able to age in place. So I will just say, to reiterate what Samantha said, having the county take a leadership role could leverage the participation of organizations like healthcare systems. They have enough money in the system to pay for digital connectivity and skills. You know, what it costs to train somebody is about what they spend giving a hospitalized patient 2 aspirin. So if you can imagine someone getting 2 aspirin or someone getting trained and connected, and the lifetime impact on their health, I think it's a no-brainer. So thank you for your interest.
I told people all that at the hospital. I always tell them, I don't need none of that.
We still have a couple more coming up. Okay, Scranton Road Ministries, one of our partners, last 20 years. 20 years.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Thank you, Dr. Schoen as well. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Whitmore, and I serve as Executive Director of Scranton Road Ministries Community Development Corporation. We're located on the near west side of Cleveland, although our program scope and participant reach really stretches across Cleveland and some of our programming across the entire county. And we've served just over 17,500 people over the past 17 years as a community service organization. And why that's relevant and why it's relevant to this conversation is because within our program portfolio, digital literacy skills training content is really fully integrated both into our workforce development programming and our educational programs, because we're very much focused on preparing young adults and youth to thrive in an increasingly global digital economy. And the angle at which we come at this is a little bit different than the good work that our former colleagues were sharing, but we've basically arrived at the same bottom line conclusion. And we see that there's a critical need for, and we also see the very positive and quantifiable impact of digital equity and skills training every day in the work that we do. Just a couple quick examples, and then I'll be on my way. Within our educational program, the educational enrichment program services that we provide are reinforced through digital literacy training platforms like educational software. Examples being like Khan Academy or the Reflex Math, and basically allows the students that we work with, as we're helping them educationally, they can access national best practice content that's engaging, that's relevant, that's designed to address different learning styles, and ultimately produces results for them. We also train them in just basic MS Office suite proficiency. And we tell them, hey, you can create a great kingdom in Roblox, but let's work on creating a report in Microsoft Word. And we also train them with multimedia training, Adobe Photoshop, PowerPoint. Digital storytelling is something that really is compelling for them. And then responsible use of social media. And why I talk about all these different platforms is, again, just to really help quantify and show the full spectrum of both the need and the opportunity that we have as a county. And then just one quick illustration of impact that it has educationally. Students within our programming have demonstrated a 15% increase in math aptitude and a 20% increase in literacy, both in terms of proficiency and comprehension. And there are a number of different factors that contribute towards that. But of course, utilizing the digital platforms we've been able to quantify have at least contributed at least 5% to those aptitude gains over the full spectrum. And that's measured by best practice and nationally based metric assessments that are used in the Cleveland schools. So it's been very significant, just the digital literacy skills that the students have, both on their educational attainment, growth, and their educational trajectory for sure. And then within our workforce development program, which is called Youth Jobs Partnership, we have a career-focused digital literacy and life skills training. And as I mentioned before, just preparing students to really excel in an increasingly global and digital economy. And at the foundational level, we're training them in the Microsoft Office suite. Again, we're telling them, listen, you might be a Snapchat ninja, but can you create a resume in Word and so forth? So we talk about resumes and cover letters. We help them create them. They do that in Word. In Excel, they create a personal budget. They present PowerPoint presentations. There's a lot of web-based platforms that we use where we're leveraging the internet for more than just YouTube, where there's online job and college research and applications, online FAFSA forms, online banking. We help them create a LinkedIn profile and then manage and understand their digital footprint. There's a lot of career pathway assessment tools that are e-based, like a work keys assessment within the career pathways landscape, Naviance, get worker assessments and so forth, which provide immediate scoring, immediate feedback, and then they can research in-demand careers, both locally and ultimately globally. There's a whole financial literacy piece that we can access through online budgeting tools and apps, banking and savings platforms that are e-based, investing tools. And really, this is just a quick snapshot of a much larger portfolio of skills that students are acquiring. And then, again, impact within the workforce development world that digital inclusion and digital equity is having. Our workforce training is reinforced through mentoring, relational accountability, best practice content, and of course, digital literacy training. And we're in a community with about a 67% local high school graduation rate. And within that community are advanced job training students who have access to all of these tools, including the digital literacy platforms they have. 94% of them graduate high school and then transition on to next step opportunities, both career and college. Just one quick example of one of the challenges. We have a very gifted young man who's part of our programming who had a strong interest in graphic design. In fact, he helped design the MyCom logo for Cleveland Foundation. He has computer access at school, at our own community computer lab, and at the local library, but no opportunity at home to reinforce and to sharpen those skills, both in terms of sharpening his graphic design skills, but also just leveraging that to access continuing education opportunities because he can't plug in. And so the process to get him, we've helped him get access at home and then transition into continuing education, but it was a process that took much longer than it should have, just because that opportunity was not available for him. So this digital, basically bottom line as I finish up here, this digital inclusion initiative would go a long way in ensuring students like Jonathan and many others we work with have the skills training and the support to sharpen their skills and to successfully transition, which will really translate into meaningful both social and financial returns for the county. So thank you for your time and consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. As you can see, over the years, we have all did quite a bit in digital inclusion. And PCs for People, Ryan.
Hi. Hello, council members. Thank you very much for your time, your patience, and your endurance. I was just thinking this is like a typical Wednesday for you all, and I certainly don't envy having to make these kind of decisions every week or every day, as you guys do, and appreciate the gravity of what you all have to weigh. So just want to introduce myself. My name is Brian Mock. I'm the Executive Director of PCs for People in Ohio. PCs for People is a national nonprofit that works to connect individuals with technology, affordable technology. We work exclusively with low-income individuals and work as a social enterprise model. So we get computers donated from corporations, we refurbish them, and then distribute them out into the community. We have free computers available. We also have desktops that range from $30 to $100, and laptops that start at $50 and go up to $150. And a $150 laptop is the shiniest, fanciest thing. It might be a year or two old. It's really actually great quality stuff. So just a little bit about what we do. So locally here in Cleveland, the PCs for People has been in Cleveland for about a year now, just over a year. I'm a Cleveland native myself, and in that past year, we've served over 7,000 individuals in connecting them with PCs or internet. The services we provide are refurbished computers, mobile hotspots on the Sprint network that are at a $15 a month price point with unlimited data, and then we do repairs and tech support for individuals. And then we certainly partner with the many partners you've heard and more for the digital literacy training. So 2 quick stats about the people that receive computers from us. So when they come, we do kind of an entry survey with them about their background, both economic, but also 60% of the people that come, of those 70,000, have never owned a computer before, which is a staggering amount if you can consider that. But also if you could think, and many of those have never sent an email address, right? Think about the first time you sent an email and how many you send a day, and many people have never done that. And then another 80% currently don't have a computer at home. So just 3 kind of quick stories and points to share and highlight. One would be, so we've certainly talked a lot about the different effects of disconnection from students to healthcare to benefit folks, folks receiving food stamps and such. But I just wanted to share a story I had with a teacher on one of our local schools. They have about 20 students, and when they're doing testing, the testing is done on computers, and they have enough broadband and working computers for 2 to 3 students to do the test at a time. So they have to slot them all in one day. The teacher says she puts her smartest kids up on their front because they'll move quickest, and then some of the more challenged kids are left last. And if you can imagine being one of those kids who's academically challenged to begin with, on a time crunch, and then you're with a machine that you're unfamiliar with, we're not setting up our children for success. And that's a really key to have both the technology in the schools, but also at the homes. We did a study. We had some external folks come in and look at our data. So part of the internet, every year individuals have to reapply with their eligibility, so we get income information from them. We found that after a year of having being connected, for an individual, family income, household income increases by about $500. For a family, about $1,000. And if you get the trifecta, I call it a family with an internet and a computer, it's about $1,600 family income increase in a year. And you're talking about a pretty minimal investment. Kind of our Cadillac package is about $240. So they can get the internet, the hotspot, 3 months of internet and a computer for that, and then they can see this kind of economic investment. And that's something our families see all the time. We run very minimally on grants and public funding. We do most of that is that $30 desktops, and families see that value. And then I think the last point I wanted to make was that the solution for a lot of this hardware is literally all around us. Corporations, businesses, the county, all recycle computers. All of this stuff has an end of life where there's still use for a private home, but not necessarily for the corporate business. And that's where we see that value, and we try to reconnect it. So I think from a county perspective, some of the points where they could intersect would be from a staff, like a staff champion from the county, would be helping to connect those nonprofit and school partnerships to a distribution channel and a network, but also promoting among the individuals. And then finally, helping to engage the business and corporate sectors in recycling and supporting our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And we have coming up next is, right on the list is Fatima Center. Ben? Yeah, one more. Yeah, Fatima Center with Ben.
Yeah, how you doing? I'm Ben Hughes, Program Coordinator at Fatima Family Center. Part of my job is I run a computer lab in the morning for the seniors. And I just want to start off, with respect to your time, I'm going to start off with just a short excerpt from one of our support letters from one of our seniors. It says, "I do not drive, and if I did not have the accessibility to use the computer lab, I would have to stand and wait for public transportation to seek out a library to use their computer lab. I was able to utilize services at the lab in order to complete my bachelor's degree in July 2019. And this lady is in our senior program. She's about 65 years old, just got her bachelor's degree utilizing our lab. So small things like that prove how much this digital inclusion really works, because otherwise she would not have access to a computer. The picture that you see that we actually this summer and during our summer camp, we along with Google and Onyx, which is a cloud-based computer solutions company based in Lakewood, and Google, who actually flew reps from Chicago out for educational and informational time. And you can see in the pictures, that's called a Jamboard, which is another smart board. And you can also see the kids using Chromebooks, which Onyx actually donated both 40 Chromebooks as well as the Jamboard so that we can bring technology into our building. And like I said, this is state-of-the-art stuff that we're dealing with. We also have the senior program. Like I said, that this year we got My Senior Center digital computer station where the seniors can actually swipe in daily registering for their daily activities, doing robocalls, picture identifications, and positive messaging. Like I said, I just want to be short and just reiterate that the need for this in our communities, as well as just the entire county, is very big, and it's very necessary because we are not connected like other communities, and we definitely need that support from you. As you see, we have support from other organizations, so we're not just asking you. We're leveraging partnerships on all levels so that we can all work to make everything better. Thanks.
Okay, Samantha and I are going to actually close and have the last words, but just before we do, I just wanted to say that I really thank Yvonne for you having us, getting this time for us to come together. And also just to say that, as you can see, the county has rich resources in digital inclusion. It's right here and it's at your fingertips. And so we're hoping that just hearing from a few of us and the different ways we have helped youth and seniors. So we have our intergenerational ring around the county where there can be a digital inclusion facility throughout the county where they can be reached, where buses and transportation will not have to be an issue. So those are things I want you to contemplate on as you continue to listen more about what digital inclusion is and how the county can take the lead. Again, I'm Wanda Davis with the Ashbury Senior Community Center, and all the things that everyone has talked about, we have all done extremely well at all of our centers. And Samantha?
Thank you. Just last, in closing, I want to thank you again and remind you that from what I understand, and you're probably aware of this, but the budget for the innovation department is going to come up in your hearings on Monday. And so you're going to be given an opportunity to provide an answer to this need in our communities at that point. And so we just would like to ask council to consider, investing in this work and supporting and giving us some resource to push this initiative forward and continue doing this great work and coordinating the resources that are here and available. Thank you.
Thank you. You have questions? Councilman Miller?
I just want to make a comment that the question of disparity is one of the most important that the county faces, and it should be in the foreground in our mind and in everything that we do. And I think we have an opportunity to save enough in county transaction costs by getting more people digitally literate to pay for the cost of doing the program. And so I think this can work, and I appreciate your presentation and look forward to seeing what we can come up with to help move this along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Miller.
All right. I thank you for coming out. I know I was able to squeeze you in, and I do apologize that the contracts went long, but that's kind of how it goes. You never know how many questions you're going to get.
We're grateful for any time.
So we thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.